I'm Kelly Jennings, CEO of PowerBand Solutions. PowerBand is a cloud-based provider of auction, inventory, and finance solutions that make buying, selling, and financing vehicles more efficient. PowerBand Solutions trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol PBX and on the OTCQB symbol PWWBF and on Frankfurt symbol 1ZV. For more information, please visit us at powerbandsolutions.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Why, thank you.
Stewart, across Canada now we're seeing protests against the approved natural gas pipeline from the northeast of British Columbia to Kitimat on the coast. What do you make of these protests, considering I believe that all the Aboriginal groups along the pipeline, their elected representatives signed on to it?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing has a kind of manufactured flavor. Think about when there's an issue that the public is getting hot bothered about. You know, you start talking about it over the kitchen table, around the water cooler. Your buddies are talking about this issue. What is it, HST or, new taxes or something? You know that there's a buzz around an issue, and then it builds up, and there's maybe politicians have to weigh in on it at some point. This one is different. Canadians woke up 2 days ago. All of a sudden, there's all these people on the streets talking about an issue no one had ever heard of outside of a few people in BC maybe. And there's hundreds of people taken to the streets in all these cities across Canada who are essentially experts about Indigenous law and process and things in British Columbia. Like how on earth did that happen? It doesn't have the feel of an authentic grassroots thing where there's really an issue here, and there's a reason for that. This is a couple of groups like the Council of Canadians, which is a very quite extreme left-wing end capitalism group. They've got hundreds of thousands of people in their mailing list, and what they've done here is very clear. Is they've called their people out to come and make a ruckus and try to stop good things happening in clean energy and Canadian prosperity, under the guise of it being an Indigenous issue. And I have the greatest respect for the challenges of both the elected chiefs in the northwest of British Columbia and the hereditary chiefs. It's a very special place there in so many ways. It's a beautiful, beautiful landscape. I'm talking about places we know as Smithers and Terrace and Houston and Burns Lake. It's a beautiful part of the country. I was up through there last summer. I was actually talking to First Nations chiefs because I wanted to discover what all this was about. So I know a fair bit about this from personal experience. Anyways, you're asking, what is this sudden emergence of a protest? What I'm saying is that it sounds a little bit manufactured, and we should be skeptical. We should ask questions. What are you really driving at here? Because it doesn't seem to be leading to a good place.
Now, is there any danger that this is going to halt the pipeline like court action halted work on the Trans Mountain Pipeline?
Yeah, I think this kind of court action out of the Indigenous question could be, it would be interesting. There's unresolved questions, but whether it's beneficial for the First Nations to actually go to court to get questions there where the answers might be ones they don't like. We've seen cases like Chilcotin where large, sprawling quests for land area becomes defined as something really quite small in the end, and who's the winner there. So I think First Nations are kind of cautious in going to law there. It's also very expensive and takes a lot of time. So I'm right now rating litigation of that type on title issues as being perhaps the lower end. On the other hand, we know that the professional protest movement, groups like Tides Canada, Tides USA, Suzuki Foundation, Dogwood Initiative, Council for Canadians I've mentioned, they have a lot of money. Tides Foundation from San Francisco, they spent over $200,000 to help to manufacture over the last 4 years the camps up there in the Northwest that are now the subject of saturation media coverage and so forth. This is a creation of that professional protest movement. And again, I'm I'm of two minds about it because it's almost exploiting real First Nations problems. I mean, you think about Aboriginal youth in Canada, 5 to 6 times higher suicide rate than non-Aboriginal youth. That is deplorable, unacceptable. And what is the path away from it? It certainly includes the path away from poverty. It includes how do you restore language and culture, because the residential school system, it broke down the languages and culture. And now the First Nations leaders I was meeting up where that LNG corridor is, they were telling me last summer, we want to restore language, because when we restore our traditional language, we're restoring the health of our culture. And when we do that, we're restoring the health of people. Like, what could be more important and legitimate to do than that? But instead, we have these protesters strategized out of Vancouver and San Francisco who are trying to stop jobs, stop a project that brings these benefits. I'm a little bit peeved, frankly, Jim, about how this is unfolding.
Well, didn't the Aboriginal groups who signed on say that they looked forward to all the jobs and the training and education this would lead to?
Yeah, well, there's 20 groups, 20 legitimate governing groups, and what we've got is the sort of media spectacle created by it's almost like a traveling circus. The pros in the protest movement are really good at this. They know what to do. They know how to tweak the interest of the media to come up and get the optics of, oh, here come the Mounties in the hardtack to take down the barricade. Oh boy, the establishment is really coming to oppress us here. Well, no one's been hurt. It's been handled so professionally by our police forces. I'm proud of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in all of this. Impeccable conduct. But it's being done for the theatrical benefit of this protest movement. And I think that's really a way that the First Nations in that area are being exploited by those who've got an agenda that's got really little to do with Indigenous rights. It's everything to do with how do we shut down the pipeline, because these people, they don't want Canada to be able to monetize its what they call fossil fuel or their hydrocarbon assets. They want to leave it in the ground because ultimately, if we do that, we'll be buying our necessary fuels from other countries. That's where we're headed here. Right now, we fortunately get quite a bit of our fuels from Canadian sources because we have them and we know how to get them. But we have these groups who flourish in our free, democratic, open society where you can say what's on your mind and you won't go to jail because of it, are using that freedom to stop our future prosperity, which is kind of revolting when you think about it, isn't it?
Could this be really funded by the U.S. natural gas industry because they look at Canada as competition, and why not have somebody else speak out on your behalf secretly?
I'm not subscribed to that view. I haven't seen the fact set that support it. I know lots of people do talk about it. I do think there are contradictions, like maybe more from the renewable industry in the state of California, where they are seeking advantage and by creating disadvantage for fossil fuels, they're creating an advantage for themselves. I think that's slightly easier to argue, particularly with other energy commodities. But with natural gas, I think it's just simply a very localist viewpoint. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the LNG Canada plant in Kitimat, once it's finished in 2023, will replace the equivalent of 19 million cars, like taking them off the road with their pollution. It is allowing China, Malaysia, Korea, Japan to reduce their carbon footprint. That's what this is all about. And do so using reliable energy. And natural gas is one of the most reliable of any energy types. So, every country, not just Canada, has got these concerns about climate change. We tend to be a little maybe sheltered in our views. We forget that the rest of the world has got the same issues we do with trying to reduce their carbon footprint. So allowing them to do that, because they don't have this natural gas, they want it, is doing the planet a favor. And that's why I'm so puzzled that groups that call themselves environmental organizations and even climate organizations would do work that is so destructive to the planet. Why would you do that? And they try to disguise it as an indigenous issue. Well, there are lots of issues for indigenous people, and the ones I hear about most often have to do with How do I get a driver's license so I can get a job? How do I get a job so that I can feed my family? How do I, as a chief, have people in my community with jobs who can go to work in the morning and feed their families and be part of a healthy community? That's what I hear over and over, and I think it's very likely if you talk to the 20 First Nations that signed benefit agreements, you would hear things like that.
Well, I just wonder, I have a question here. Maybe we'll talk about it right after the break.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp, MGI and the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected several high-grade gold intersections, including 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. Additional drill targets on the LH property have been identified by a 2018 drone airborne magnetic survey to further evaluate a pyrrhotite-enriched gold-bearing system. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, my question is, when did natural gas become all of a sudden this environmental enemy? Because I grew up with the time saying we're replacing fuel oil and coal as heating sources for our homes. Instead, we're switching to natural gas. And as that happened, the smog that used to be in downtown Vancouver from all the wood burning wood mills and so on disappeared. The smog that we saw in the 80s in Vancouver disappeared. All of a sudden, natural gas was considered the solution to clean skies. And now, it seems to me over the last 3 or 4 years, it's become evil. Why? When did this happen and why?
Well, I think it has to do with those who are pushing the so-called renewables alternatives, which in some cases are alternatives, but in other cases aren't really alternatives, because how can they be alternatives if they're not reliable? I mean, I almost divide energy nowadays into not renewables and non-renewables, but rather reliables and unreliables. Because reliable is something, you turn the key in the car, it goes on. You turn the knob on your barbecue, it switches on. The thermostat switch, you turn that, furnace comes on because it's natural gas. That's reliable. And that contrasts to, say, I don't want to disparage other ones, but I have to give an example like wind or solar. These are good in many ways, but you can't call them reliable because if the wind stops blowing, that's not reliable energy from wind. So how do you supplement that? And here's where the magic is that should be satisfying these people who are fighting natural gas for the wrong reasons. What they should be realizing, I think they do, I mean, it's not hard to figure out, is this. It's that natural gas is how you can build out more of the unreliable sources like wind and solar. Because in the time when those aren't producing electricity and you still need electricity, you can just switch on your natural gas power plant. With coal, you can't do that. Just the nature of coal, it's a fire process. Once you start it up, you leave it on. So it's always burning. And that's why in BC, they actually consume right now a lot of cheap, almost free coal electricity at nighttime from Alberta. Now, Alberta's phasing out coal, so that won't last forever, but that's been the case in the past. And natural gas is different. You turn it on when you need it. And that's why, one reason why in China, Japan, they want it so badly. Because it will allow them to increase their portfolios of alternative emerging energy. If they don't have that backstop in the form of natural gas power generation, they won't be able to develop those alternatives. So if you're truly committed to those alternatives, as lots, especially younger people, everyone's so excited, solar, wind, it's great. Well, it's not great if it's not producing any electricity, like that forlorn wind turbine at the top of Grouse Mountain that seems to never move. It's not great if it doesn't produce any electricity. It's great if it is backstopped by natural gas. So
Do natural gas pipelines pose any special danger to the environment? I mean, our cities and parks right now are crisscrossed with natural gas pipelines, and it doesn't seem to be disrupting everyday life. Would it disrupt wildlife?
Well, that's right. I mean, when you install a pipeline, you're going to disturb the environment. You have to dig a trench or bore a tunnel and, throw that pipe in there. But we have regulatory processes that are, as good as it gets in making sure that the builders of these things, the companies, are following the law. Our law is so strict. I mean, with the case of, I know, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, as that thing eventually gets built, what we'll see is there'll be one welder and one inspector. Every welder will have one inspector looking over his or her shoulder to make sure that weld is correct. That's how intense our regulatory requirements are. The Coastal GasLink pipeline, that's the one for LNG going from the northeast of BC to the northwest for the LNG Canada project, $40 billion project. That's a pipeline. It's built pretty much the same way. Now, the difference is that it's going to be carrying a gaseous cargo through it, and not a liquid. And I think overall, if there was some mishap, and that's incredibly rare, but if there was, it would be a leak and it just vaporizes, it evaporates. It wouldn't be the kind of, the fears that people have about potential ruptures of the pipeline that carries a liquid. So that's not really a concern. It's not going to contaminate water if there's a problem. And I think it's irresponsible to suggest that it is for where we see these fears. In other ways, I think natural gas is beneficial if you can tap off it into local communities that don't have natural gas. Isn't that wonderful? You've got the supply in areas, I mean, that's remote in the northwest. These mountain valleys and passes there, they're far away from infrastructure and cities, and just wonderful that you've got this carrying capacity with a needed commodity in it.
How many Aboriginal jobs would be created with the construction of this pipeline and then the supervision of it?
Well, the numbers that First Nations have got, I think because there's so many often smaller First Nations, the numbers may not always look that big. For sure, there are thousands of jobs. I think in Kitimat, they're building a temporary workers camp for something like 4,000 people. Some of those will definitely be Indigenous folks. I think the benefits are felt in all kinds of ways. Here's an example. A driver's license. To you and I, people who live in cities who are just used to jumping in the car and driving around, imagine you didn't have a driver's license because there were a whole bunch of reasons that were just never got around to it, couldn't get to it, a whole bunch of reasons. Well, that's often the case for rural First Nations, women First Nations who are isolated in rural areas, who don't have licenses and may not have a vehicle. It's really challenging to get around and enjoy the freedom, the independence that we take for granted in cities. So one of the first things for those who want to access jobs, First Nations who want to get into jobs in LNG and this whole value chain, they have to go and get a license. There's someone I know, she's a Aboriginal woman from the Northwest. She started a school that's serving First Nations in communities with special programs to get those licenses as efficiently as possible. And then once they do that, they can actually apply for a job, because for a lot of these jobs, you've got to be able to drive a vehicle. So, check box number 1, get a driver's license. Number 2, go looking for that job. And I went to a couple of training centers in the Northwest where I saw that the capacity to learn the computer skills, one of the things I hear so often is, I want my members, this would be a chief talking, I want my members to be able to earn a trade, learn a trade so they can earn a living. And what a great, flexible life skill to have, a building trade, to be able to go out, or any kind of trade, to go out and make your living on your terms, rather than, unfortunately, this great legacy of unemployment and dependency that First Nations leaders that I speak to all the time are so unhappy with. No one wants to get the handout. That's what I hear. Let's manage our way away from poverty, not manage poverty and stay in it. But we've got these outside environmental groups. they don't seem to have a position on whether Indigenous people should be trapped in poverty or not. It doesn't seem to be an issue for them. As long as their agenda of stopping Canadian development is satisfied, who cares about First Nations, because they're moving on to the next thing that they protest after that. You know, a lot of people maybe thought, oh, those environmental groups, they're protesting oil pipelines, and once they've done that, they'll go off, do something else somewhere else. No, they're doing something else here. It's always moving on to the next thing. Here's the proof. They're against the safe, beneficial, climate-friendly LNG pipeline. This is crazy.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Arctic Star Exploration, operated by a team of proven mine finders, is focused on diamonds in Finland and the Northwest Territories of Canada. Work programs are underway in Finland and Canada. Arctic Star trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol ADD, on Frankfurt symbol 82A1, and the OTCQB symbol ASDZF. Please visit our website arcticstar.ca or call us at 604-689-1799.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, a thought that I just had here. Perhaps this anti-natural gas pipeline protest has been formed to take away the headlines that the truckers' convoy to Ottawa has created.
Well, that's a thought, isn't it? I mean, the full throat that we see being attained by Albertans who are wondering what happened to their jobs, wondering why their houses aren't worth as much as they paid for them, wondering why their children are maybe going to have to move somewhere else to get a job. Those people, you know, it's been wearing them down a couple of years, and it's wearing them down so much that they're now taking to the road to do things. I mean, there's been protests and demonstrations of this frustration all over the place. And, you know, I think that there's still a sense in Eastern Canada or among some groups anywhere in Canada that doesn't matter. Those people are not really relevant to, you know, the greater economy. Let's not worry about that. Well, that's not how those individuals feel who have seen this slow grinding down of opportunity in certain industries that are so important to the economy. I mean, it's still the case in 2019 that the resources that we produce in Canada are the strength of our country. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have a strong country. You know, it used to be that we had, you know, leading edge technology, we had fantastic human resources, we had access to capital to do things, and we had resources. And now I think the world has changed. We don't have the leading edge in technology anymore in Canada. We're kind of following on that with human resources. It's a struggle to get enough people educated into the areas where that education is needed. The message on capital from inside Canada that the world is hearing. I'm sure we don't wish to be sending this message from Canada, but this is the message the world is receiving, is that Canada's closing for business. We're kind of a joke amongst the finance people and with the suspenders and striped suits in London and New York now. Bit of a joke. Canada? You must be joking. And it's terrible that this is the case, but it's what we've allowed to happen. And so, when someone jumps in their truck and wants to drive to Ottawa to make their views known, I applaud that. And, it's a sign of genuine opposition. And I think those, I've called them elites and been sort of, you know, some people are not happy with me calling out elites, but there are elites in Canada who are perfectly happy to ignore what working people are experiencing. And I'm happy to stand up for those working people. We all should be, actually.
Stewart, what kind of future does energy have in Canada? Is there anything coming up to promote it? Well,
I mean, broadly speaking, let's face it, life is energy. Modernity is energy. We have to get our heads around this. We have to figure it out. You know, there's good reasons to want to make sure that we are always getting better at it, but we need to have energy. So what is the future? I think the future, LNG is big. You know, I wanted to tell you, Jim, about something I'm doing next week in Calgary with a bunch of people who share my concern that we keep things on the right course. I mean, it's great when industry is out there doing the right thing and companies do the right thing and governments are out there trying to do the best they can. I think that's important, but when something so important as our energy future, I think having even a broader set of interest groups who believe that good things can happen if we focus on, say, LNG. Let's have liquefied natural gas as part of our energy portfolio that we export, that allows us to build our renewables up in the ways that I was talking about before, and then creating all these benefits. So, people from the universities, people from groups like mine, ResourceWorks, who, are independent groups that call it the way they see it, because that's what I do. And people from, government and diplomatic services and all these different, and media people who are concerned about communication and how the public sees and perceives issues. We're getting together next week we're taking a day and we're going to, try to focus our minds on where we go from here. Because I think if we don't do that, we might see that some of the things that were, very harmful to forestry in BC, that led to a lot of jobs being lost, that, with the energy sector elsewhere in Canada, we see, some issues there that might be not necessary. And we've also seen that, once again, we've got this sort of manufactured protest industry that seems at whim able to conjure up, hundreds of apparently disgruntled people on the streets to go and, invade buildings and get in the news. I guess that's the point of it all, get in the news. We need to stand up for the majority, because most people are not out there doing those things. Most people are trying to earn a living and keep the kids healthy and occupied and so forth. And so we're really representing that majority of Canadians in ensuring that the outcomes are good, that the economy is recognized, that the environment is protected, the climate is addressed, all those things.
Stewart, where and when is that huddle up in Calgary happening, and how can people find out more information about it?
Well, it's happening January 15th in Calgary. Right now, at this stage, it'll expand afterwards, but we needed to have a kind of strategy group. So it's invitation only in Calgary. We'll have maybe 100 people out who've been the most enthusiastic ones saying, let's get in here. It'd be nice if we had 10,000, but we've got to start somewhere. So this will be where we sort of get the big themes up on the table, figure out where we're going to go. And I'll be talking about it later. And maybe our next show we can circle back on this, and I'll tell you what we learned.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com, and you can find him on Twitter at SJMuir. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for Stewart or any of our other guests can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.